In this episode, we're going to talk about one of Disney's earliest attempts at a superhero film, one of the biggest arcade games of all time, and one of pop culture's biggest R&B groups of the 80s. So, stick around. Fellow 80s enthusiasts, and welcome to ABCs of the 80s. My name's Rob, and this is the show where we take a brief encyclopedia-like look at 3 different items from the 80s that all begin with the same letter. This episode's letter is C. Before we jump into the episode, let me talk shop very briefly. See, I have not done this show in a very long time, and at that I only did 2 episodes. I did the letter A and the letter R, and I had a lot of fun doing them, but I became discouraged very quickly because no matter what I did, I was hit by dozens of copyright claims because of how I wanted to present the show. Now, some of those copyright claims I could easily dispute because they weren't even from the actual copyright holder. And I think I talked about it in an episode a long time ago, like a little vlog, where I felt like they were Russian hackers because when I did a search for who was filing this copyright claim, it happened to be a Russian company that had no ties to the original content at all. Anyway, some of the claims did have merit, and I tried to dispute them by saying I was, presenting this in a commentary / educational way, but they didn't see it that way. So, like I said, I got discouraged and I kind of gave up. Well, recently I had a little bit of time to kill, and I stumbled upon the old episodes and I watched them, and I was actually entertained by what I did, and that's kind of hard for me to be entertained by myself. So I thought, let's give this another try and see what happens, and I'll just have to present this in a whole new way. Anyway, let's get to the episode. Like I said, this episode is the letter C. And to kick things off, let's look at a pop culture phenomena that happened during the 80s and early 90s. That all began with a simple commercial. No one could have anticipated the meteoric rise into the ranks of pop culture of the California Raisins when they made their first appearance on June 19, 1986. Appearing in a Sun-Maid Raisins commercial, the claymation R&B group sang the 1968 Marvin Gaye hit, I Heard It Through the Grapevine, and helped put the classic song on the Billboard Hot 100 charts in 1987. Animated by Will Vinton and Vinton Studios, the California Raisins appeared in many more commercials for Sun-Maid Raisins and the California Raisin Advisory Board. Vinton, using the popularity of the Raisins, released Claymation Christmas Celebration in 1987 and won an Emmy Award. In the special, the Raisins made an appearance and sang the Christmas song, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. With their popularity growing, the California Raisins began to endorse Post-Raisin Bran cereal, appeared in the marketing for Hardee's cinnamon and raisin biscuits, which in turn Hardee's sold the popular PVC California Raisin figures, and the image of the Raisins started to appear on everything from lunchboxes and bedsheets to Halloween costumes and comic books. On November 4th, 1988, CBS aired a primetime television special called Meet the Raisins. The musical mockumentary was again created by Vinton Studios and was nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award. It also gave the band members individual names and roles. AC was vocals, Bebop the drummer, Stretch played bass, and Red was the guitar player and piano player. The following year, in 1989, CBS began airing the traditionally animated Saturday morning cartoon, The California Raisin Show. The show only lasted 1 season with 13 episodes, but it expanded the Raisin universe by introducing new characters and featuring musical numbers every episode. Even though the show was traditional 2D animation, it was still oversaw by Will Vinton himself. A sequel to the original CBS special aired in 1990 under the title The Raisins Sold Out, The California Raisins 2. This special saw the Raisins hiring a new manager with the goal of making a comeback. Sadly, a comeback wasn't in the cards for the California Raisins. Although very popular with the public, the California Raisins campaign eventually failed because its production cost the raisin growers almost twice their earnings. CalRab, the organization who made the campaign, was also closed on July 31st, 1994, due to disagreements with raisin producers over the fairness of required payments to the organization. I have to add that personally, when the Raisins made their introduction in 1986, I was an instant fan. And when Hardee's started releasing the PVC figures, I was all over it. Now, there was always one that I wanted to get my hands on and never did, and that was the one with sunglasses. He was the most popular of all of the Raisins, and he was a figure that eluded me while growing up. Hardee's would release other sets almost yearly until the Raisins phenomenon dried up. At the end of the day, it is truly amazing that these claymation Raisins grew in popularity like they did. I mean, they were just a ad campaign for a raisin company. I mean, raisins. Not the first thing kids think about when they think of a snack. I mean, granted, I hated raisins as a kid, but I grew to like them as an adult. Anyway, that is C for the California Raisins. Anyway, next on the list is one of the earliest attempts of a superhero film by Walt Disney, and that is one of my favorites as a kid, Condorman. Condorman was an action-adventure comedy superhero film produced by Walt Disney Productions in 1981. The movie starred Michael Crawford as Woodrow Woody Wilkins, an eccentric American comic book writer and illustrator who was asked by his friend at the CIA to help a Russian woman named Natalia to defect while acting out the fantasy of bringing his comic book creation, Condorman, to life. In a time where comic book movies were few and far between, Condorman was a fantastic family adventure movie. One of my earliest memories was renting the oversized white clamshell Walt Disney emblazoned video from the local video store. It was a personal favorite for many years. Even though the movie was directed by famed British director Charles Jarrott, filmed on location at beautiful locations such as Paris, Monte Carlo, and Zermatt, Switzerland, featured amazing stunt driving from renowned French stunt driver Remy Julien, whose previous work include The Italian Job and several James Bond films, among more than 100 others. And had special effects completed by Colin Chilvers, who previously worked on the first two Superman films. The movie bombed. Many critics at the time panned the film for having poor special effects, a dull story, and said Disney was behind the times in regard of what moviegoers wanted to see. Condorman unfortunately was part of a string of Disney failures that jeopardized the future of the company, which is almost a comical statement nowadays. Due to the poor reception, a sequel was never made, even though the movie left room for it. But an original comic adventure sequel was published by Whitman Comics. Taking place in the US, Woody is now engaged to Natalia, and his Condorman machines are being built by a toy company, which is a cover for a CIA unit. The same villains from the movie appear again, attempting to take Natalia back to the USSR by force. Today, the movie has a cult following from Disney fans and has popped up in cameos in recent Disney properties, such as the video game series Disney Infinity and in Pixar's Toy Story. Like I said, Condorman was one of my favorite movies growing up. I can remember back in the day in the video store, all the Disney movies were in these huge white clamshell boxes, and they would just stand out from all the other movies at the time. And Condorman was one that I instantly gravitated towards. At the time, I was just a fledgling comic book dork, and this movie spoke volumes to me. Now, I can't recall much about the movie nowadays because it has a very, very limited DVD release, and last I heard you had to be a Disney Vault member to get a copy of it, and that was many years ago. I don't even know if it's still being offered, and I don't even know if there's any way to view this movie nowadays. It would be great to see it pop up on Disney Plus eventually, but with how critically panned it is and how they kind of just scuttled it, I doubt that we will see it. But from what you saw from some of the 80s facts that popped up, the movie definitely has fans in high places, so you never know what could happen. Now's the time of the show where we take a look at one of the 80s most beloved toy lines. That's right, G.I. Joe, and take a look at one of their iconic characters. So, here we go! Yo, Joe! Now, this is one of my favorite G.I. Joe characters of all time. And honestly, I can't put my finger on exactly why he is. But when I saw this letter come up for this episode, I just knew this was who we had to talk about. Chuckles made his first appearance in 1987 in the 6th wave of the G.I. Joe action figures produced by Hasbro Toys. His real name is Philip M. Provost, and his rank is that of a Sergeant E5. Chuckles was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. Chuckles' primary MOS is criminal investigations, and his secondary is intelligence. His first exposure to hole and corner operations was working for Southeastern Insurance Group in Fort Lauderdale. He then eventually made his way to the U.S. Army's Criminal Investigations Division before joining G.I. Joe. He is known for being so conscientious about keeping up his cover that he volunteers for missions no one else wants. Chuckles is naturally likable, which has made him well suited for undercover operations. Chuckles is naturally likable, which has made him well suited for undercover operations. His gregarious nature also helps him to earn the trust of his marks, so that they have no idea that he's actually spying on them. Chuckles does this not for any accolades or recognition, for there is no record of file crediting him with the information he provides. He's aware of the consequences of being found out, but he's also confident in his ability to talk his way out of any situation. The only appearance that Chuckles had in animated form was in G.I. Joe the movie. In the movie, he had 0 speaking lines, but had some pretty cool action sequences to help the Joe team. As far as the comic book goes, Chuckles had some very memorable moments and appeared in many issues. Over the years, Chuckles has kind of garnered a cult-like following, and I feel like I'm in really great company because of that. Over the past decade or so, the more recent comic book series have focused on him and had some great storylines. And there was even a rumor that in 2019, the draft of the G.I. Joe movie that they were writing at the time, he was the one character that they mentioned specifically by name. That would have been really fun to see, a more realistic version of G.I. Joe that focused on undercover espionage and crime fighting. I mean, I love the bigger-than-life sci-fi fantasy version of G.I. Joe, but for the normal, everyday moviegoer, that could have been a great doorway into the world of G.I. Joe. What could have been? Anyway, the last entry for the letter C in this episode is the arcade classic Centipede. Bursting into arcades in 1981, Centipede was a fixed shooter arcade game developed and published by Atari Inc. The game was designed by Donna Bailey and Ed Logg, and was one of the most commercially successful games from the golden age of arcade video games. The player controls a small, insect-like bug blaster. It is moved around the bottom area of the screen with a trackball and fires small darts at a segmented centipede advancing from the top of the screen through a field of mushrooms. Each segment of the centipede becomes a mushroom when shot. Shooting one of the middle segments splits the centipede into 2 pieces at that point. Each piece then continues independently on its way down the screen with the rear piece sprouting its own head. If the centipede's head is destroyed, the segment behind it becomes the next head. The action escalates as the game board becomes littered with mushrooms and the centipede's speed increases. The centipede is not alone though, as other creatures such as fleas, spiders, and scorpions join in on the fun. With the fledgling home video game market becoming more popular in the early 80s, Centipede sold 1,475,240 cartridges during 1982 to 1983 on the Atari, becoming the 11th best-selling Atari game of all time. Also at the time, many insisted that Centipede's Atari cartridge was the best home arcade edition you could buy. The game was ported to many devices during the 80s and still remains a popular game to be re-released today on many home consoles. Now, honestly, I don't have many memories of playing Centipede at that time. I'm sure I popped a few quarters into the cabinets at the time, but I really don't have any defining memories of the experience. My only real experiences are more recent over the past few decades of playing it on emulators and re-releases, and still having a pretty good time with it. There is no doubt that Centipede is one of the most popular games of all time. It has a very simple plot, a really great game board, really great visual and vivid colors, and that was part of its design. Now, one of the game designers for Centipede, Donna Bailey, was one of the first women to ever program a video game, and that is amazing. And she purposely used those vivid colors to entice women gamers, which made Centipede a very popular game for women gamers at the time. And that is a groundbreaking statistic to have. Anyway, thank you so much for stopping by and checking out the inaugural re-release of ABCs of the 80s. I had a great time researching these items, and I can't wait to do more. And hopefully I will get this on a more regular schedule and not be discouraged like I was in the past. Anyway, like I said, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them, and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new around here and you enjoyed this or any of the episodes that YouTube is recommending down here, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you will be notified whenever there's a new episode. So anyway, until next time, thank you for watching. Keep being rad and stay dorky!